on getting started in Battletech. And we're going to start by, I'm assuming that you have already gotten your mechs, because you probably just jumped right on in to get some mechs, and you don't have any painting equipment yet, and you don't want to learn how to paint really, but you want to kind of not be an embarrassment on the tabletop, but you don't want to be a pro painter. In fact, you just don't have the time for it, but you just want to avoid being an embarrassment on the tabletop. So this is for you, okay? So if you want to just quickly paint your mechs, do not ever buy a paint that you are not specifically going to use on a specific part of a mech. That is, do not go around buying greens and blues and reds and yellows because, well, you know, those are different colors of the rainbow, and I'm sure you'll someday use those colors. No, you won't. You're basically gonna, if you buy a set of paints, you will never use 95% of those paints. They're just going to be complete trash, completely wasted money. And instead, you're going to end up buying specialized colors that happen to work well together. And you're going to use those, and then you will never use the set again. Maybe you'll even disastrously experiment with your set, and you'll come up with some disastrous paint job, and then you're going to be like trying to paint over it and strip it and later on and stuff. And that's just kind of... So just don't buy a paint set. Instead, look at YouTube, including these videos. Look at what paints work. Do not try to come up with some clever paint scheme on your own. Just totally cheesily copy what some pro has painted. Take those exact specific colors, only buy those specific exact colors, and then paint them. You'll find that your mechs look really darn good because those professional painters have a keen sense for color and color matching and things like that. Something that you, perhaps even as like an engineer or some other kind of working class type person who has a reasonable amount of money and kind of in their 30s or 40s and just don't have the time for anymore, but you want to do the tabletop stuff, you will not have time to be some artistic master, and you don't care about that. You just want to look good on the tabletop, so you're going to just copy what you see in these videos. You're going to paint exactly like them, making as many shortcuts as possible, and then your mechs are going to look pretty good. And the basic rules of painting are, you have to prime. Do not paint directly on the miniature, ever, no matter what miniature it is. You have to prime it, which is easier than it sounds. Then you then base coat it. That is, you basically color every part, whatever part it's supposed to be, and you need to have decided what color your mech is going to be before that. So that's base. So the step between priming and base coating is actually the hardest step because it's a mental step, not a physical step, and you have to choose your colors. In which case, I'm going to just tell you that these are the 5. We're going to paint all 5 houses. And you will just pick one of those houses as your color that you're going to paint, and you're just going to paint that, and everything will be great. You'll be like on your way. You pick your paints to base coat, then you base coat. Then you get into the fancier stuff. Now this sounds fancy, but it's actually very important to make the mech look good. Also, kind of cover up some of the flaws that in your base coating. You'll do something called a wash. And you will have to buy some specialized paint for that. You do not do it with normal paint. There's specific wash paints. And then the next question is, if you want to go one step further, then you can highlight. I do not bother wasting my time highlighting anymore. I just wash and I'm done. And the reason for that is highlighting makes it look a little more pro, but you end up spending a lot more time painting your models. And the goal is to get tabletop ready with the least effort. And the least effort is prime, base coat, wash, done. And you can optionally do detailing, like to paint the cockpits with nice cockpit colors. You can put gun heat effects on your guns and missile launchers and things like that. You can do detailing if you want, but you don't actually need to. You get like 90% of the way there without even detailing, without even painting the cockpit. You just prime, base, wash, done. It might sound like heresy to some people, but you will you don't really see those details anyway that much, but the overall impression will be almost all there if you just do that. And however, when you do, you will kind of just maybe paint the cockpit black and leave it black, which will be convenient for the future, because if you want to go back and retouch it later, you can put fancy cockpit effects on it, but many of them require the cockpit to start off painted black. And that means either you start with a black cockpit, you paint on some metal, and then you put some glaze over that to make it shiny, some colored glaze, or you put some color changing paint on it, or some other metallic paint, like to give it a gold sheen or something like that. Or you could just leave it black, or you could put like doing wet blending of glass cockpit jewel effects, and there's no limit to how far you can go into it as you spend more and more time on it, but it's just not worth it initially. You just paint it black and leave it that way, and whatever you do, do not like overcoat your mech with a clear coat. Do not do that. Again, you're not trying to make museum pieces here. You just want to do tabletop, and it's possible that you end up stripping some of these off, or you'll want to touch up details later, especially cockpits and weapons, in which case the worst thing in the world you can do is to overcoat your mech with some sort of clear coat or hard coat or ard coat or something that makes it hard to rework. And you don't really care if the paint's going to chip off a little bit necessarily, because you can always retouch it later. And if you're going to only play very rarely, you can just store it in a box and the paint's not going to chip off. As long as you've primed the mech first before painting it, your paint is probably not going to come off even after many years of storage, which I've experimented with and I've had no problems with. Other people will claim this is heresy or something, but that's just what I've seen. I've seen that if you just prime and base, you do not need to coat it with some protectant or anything like that. Instead, just leave it as is, and makes it easier to rework later as your skill improves, if it ever improves.